Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Sharon here. Sharon, you're somebody that's been in the world of business leadership for a good amount of time, and you've had a lot of different interesting roles. You were at Mattel, you were at Hasbro, but you were really drawn to be at BuildABear. And BuildABear is a special company. It's a company that gives a lot of people really positive, joyful memories. It's something that you usually get a BuildABear around an important event to you, a birthday or things like that. And you've been leading the company for some time. You've done a really great job. I mean, Build-A-Bear is has really done well in this kind of retail interesting landscape that we're in today. And you also written a book that is about finding meaning in the modern world, which I think is like really important, especially in the workplace, to find meaning that is important to you and kind of latching onto that. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So kind of just going back to the beginning, like how did your interest in being a business leader and wanting to be in the world of business in general, like how did that passion begin?
Yeah, I probably not going to have a sort of traditional answer there because I can tell you that I didn't really have an aspiration of being a business leader per se. I did sort of emerge as a leader in high school and college and things like that. I think sometimes that it's sometimes it's thrust upon you, and sometimes it just you become that person. You're the one left standing, and it was probably more driven in situations where I'm like, well, hey, why don't we do this, or we ever do that, or the way I explain things, or the reasons why, and then I get elected the president or the captain or the whatever, and I didn't intend to do that. It just kind of happens, and then we ended up, moving toward a good result. But I was in the advertising industry starting out and more of a creative. And started out went to New York City, and then I was asked to move over to the business side as an account executive. And once I got into that and working on big clients like M&M Mars, that really sparked a bit of curiosity for me about, well, what else goes into all of these decisions? Because I'm meeting clients who are managing entire portfolios of business and the total P&L for their whatever their brand or their functional area. And one of the gentlemen that I worked for at M&M Mars actually recommended that I get my MBA. And I because I had expressed to him, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why are you making that decision? Even he let me join them on the way they, buy futures for cocoa and sugar. And I just thought this was fascinating.
Mhm.
And he was highly encouraging of me. And so that's how I ended up getting into business leadership. And it's traditionally in the advertising business known as going to the client side. This was my catalyst to the client side of taking a pause there and getting my MBA in Columbia.
So you kind of always had this creative side to you and the leadership side. I mean, that's kind of what has intersected today and what you're doing now.
Yeah, at first I thought that was not a natural evolution, but it's in some ways it's turned out to be kind of my secret sauce
Mhm.
of being able to flip back and forth and speak to both sides of the business on your left brain, right brain all the time, and mashing that up of that there can be an efficient and effective solution that's also super creative and brand and consumer centric. And that I think that's probably why I was attracted to things like Mattel and Hasbro and now Build-A-Bear, but it's also probably why I've been successful at Mattel and Hasbro and Build-A-Bear, because that mashed up thinking is rewarded in those types of companies that are consumer centric, very creative and very brand building. Because if you can't talk to and convince or lead both sides of that equation that exists in those kinds of companies, you can't get to a great conclusion.
Right. It's an interesting observation because like Mattel, Hasbro, very creative companies. Same with Build-A-Bear. There's a lot of creativity, and it really is the core of what you guys, of all those companies, what they do. I mean, the creativity leads to innovative products, and you have to continuously be creative, especially with the demographic you're in.
That's right. And it's a very fast paced business.
Mm.
The toy industry is. And I think that's another thing that attracted me to it. That's true also in advertising. There's always something new, always something different, a new competitive landscape, a new impact from the consumer, new type of technology that you have to lean into. I like that fast paced piece of it, and I like that left brain, right brain piece of this industry. And I think that's probably why I've stayed in it. I jumped out for a minute and was in fashion and footwear, where I learned vertical retail with the Stride Right Children's Group. But as soon as BuildABear made the call, I jumped back into the toy industry.
How did this opportunity to be a Build-A-Bear today happen? Like, how did that arise?
Well, that's part and parcel. That's what it was. Is that I was called by a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Maxine, the founder of Build-A-Bear, started the company in 1997. Incredibly dynamic woman, was ready to step down from her helm as the chief executive bear, and which is what she called herself and still does to this day, which I think is wonderful. We retired the title for her, and and they were looking for what in today's vernacular would be called a snowflake of, oh, we need somebody that understands vertical retail, understands kids, understands moms and kids, understands, marketing, is brand centric, knows the toy industry, can, knows how to source toys, knows how to, like, all that who is this person? And magically, a little bit, I was that snowflake, and Maxine and the board were gracious enough to give me a shot, not having been a sitting CEO and moving into that role as a publicly traded company CEO. That was a bit of a leap, but I did have some strong footing in the functionality of the company, what needed to happen. I'm a big believer in brand, and a great track record on turnarounds of business units, brands, and so that all made sense. And fortunately, I think that so far so good.
Most definitely. So, if you were to kind of look back at like a couple qualities that you think they found in you that made you want to be, that they wanted you to be this leader of the company, like what would those qualities be?
Um, I like to bring people along with me.
Hmm.
This company had and I appreciate culture.
Hmm.
And this company, largely because of Maxine, having been a founder and having a very powerful persona, this was a extraordinarily specific and powerful culture. So I didn't want to destroy that. And a lot of times, leaders, particularly in a financial turnaround circumstance, which this was, um, like to come in with more of a, call it a bull in a china shop approach. Sometimes it's easier, honestly, to create change and get traction faster by almost destroying what was, and in some cases vilifying what was. And you can see that played out if you're a student of business, a student of turnarounds, which I have been. You can see how that happens. Sometimes it's successful, and sometimes it's destructive. In this case, to me, not only would it have been wrong, and I don't mean just politically wrong, I mean, there was so much that was right about Build-A-Bear. It just would have I'd been the incorrect decision. But I was able, I think, to communicate that I believed that I could span that gap of holding on to the heart, like literally not ripping out the heart of the company while changing the way we
Hmm.
did business to return to profitability. And I give the team and the organization and Maxine tremendous amount of credit. And I appreciate Maxine giving me quite a bit of grace on the fact that I needed to have some pretty hard conversations about the path forward is not about trying to repeat what they had done that was very successful, because the run of the challenge period was in a post-recessionary time frame,
Hmm.
where the things, the dynamics, the economic dynamics that had made them successful in the past were not going to come back.
Hmm.
There, we were ramping up to what became known as the retail apocalypse and the mall complete, sort of like decrease of traffic on almost a 50% cum basis over a 6-year time period. Like this, what had created that success would not return. And so Build-A-Bear had to change fundamentally. We couldn't ignore the digital economy. We couldn't, and we were becoming multi-generational. It gave us a great opportunity to expand the addressable market. And sometimes that's a hard balance beam to walk on. But I believe they believed that I could do it, and I came in with the right spirit about it, because I needed to bring the company with me.
So right when you got in, you mentioned this like return to profitability was a big focus, Sharon. How did you like right away like take? I mean, maybe it's drastic or not, like, but take measures to go and turn this around because that's it's, of course a very important thing to be able to get to and to maintain.
Well, we immediately pulled what I call some traditional levers on the return to profitability. I mean, it's sometimes things that are happening inside of companies are out of, and I don't mean this in a negative way. Every company does it. We do it right now. Are happening out of habit. And there's the first step is the discipline of being able to go through almost through every line of expense, and understand, is this creating value? Is this creating value? Is it? And I'm sure that at some point it probably was. And it's the discipline to say, but it's not now. And so that's kind of the bottom up approach. But then there's big picture things when we needed to, for example, stop rolling out new locations, which are very expensive, capital intensive endeavor, until we understood what some of the challenges were. And oftentimes the opening new stores, that has been a classic tool in the past to reinvigorate growth and interest and profit. But in this case, we needed to get to the underlying drivers of what were our challenges, from the shifts in the consumer shopping habits, the shifts in the economy, not use a tool from the past for a problem of the future.
Uh, I mean, the model that you're talking about before, like the shift to digital. I mean, the Build-A-Bear model, like the in-store experience, is really unlike very few other brands. I mean, you stuff your own bear. You have this like machine that has all the stuffing in it. It's quite a unique experience. So taking that digital, it's kind of different for a Build-A-Bear brand than other brands because of how much of an experience this is retail. How are you thinking about like the digital age and bringing this in a really authentic and a unique way that would still bring the great Build-A-Bear brand to the digital world?
Yeah, that's a very good question with an interesting answer,
Hmm.
because when the digital economy was the fastest growing retail channel by far,
Hmm.
you don't get the luxury to ignore it. It just, you have to ask the question, how can I, not will I or won't I participate in the digital economy? How can I profitably and incrementally uh, participate in the digital economy? And when you start to, half of your challenge as a leader is to ask the right question. And you need to think through what that is. Now, I did not want to just drive a website that's going to undermine the importance of the experience and cannibalize the store business. And I mentioned that we were becoming multi-generational around that point. So we're coming up on our 20th year, because that would have been, yeah, I started in 2013 and the company started in 1997. So we were ramping up to our 20th year. And that's usually in the toy industry. And remember, I ran the US toy division at Hasbro and had been at Mattel and these iconic brands. And many of these brands had crossed this point, and I was a part of that process, whether that was the evolution of My Little Pony, the launch of the first film for Transformers, both of those marking moments in time when the addressable consumer market stretched significantly. That moment for a toy brand can either be the beginning of the end
Mm.
or the moment of a flywheel. And that flywheel is usually twofold. It's the reminding that consumer who was the first, one of the first consumers of your brand, who probably now have children at the age that would be appropriate, how much fun and what an incredible experience that was. And absolutely, most parents want to share remarkable and memorable experiences with their kids that they loved when they were children. But done well and finding the right angle, you also can become a part of their life in a different way, whether that's through collectibles or affinity or trend
Mm.
products and things like that. And so we did both.
Wow.
And we then created the website in a way with new licenses and different approaches to it that we were filling the need for gifting and customized products and collectible products and interesting licensing, where we then over indexed with the teen and adult consumer online, who it's not that critical that they have the experience. In fact, they already had the experience, and that's why they love Build-A-Bear, which, by the way, was really, really important to understand because it tells you how stretchable the brand is. It
Mm.
tells you that that experience halos onto the product itself. You don't always have to go through the stuffing process to love the brand and want and understand the value of the brand. But then we also, and this was a long process to return the stores to profitability as well, we want to keep that. That still is and remains and should be the primary way people have their first experience with Build-A-Bear. It's an indelible memory, and we're marking moments in time. And it's still one of my favorite parts about this job is somebody sharing those stories with me. And we truly are woven into the fabric of family lore. And I love that. It's so valuable. But that transition in that at that very time allowed us to create an entirely different reason for an
Mhm.
entirely different consumer to drive those online sales. And now 40% of our sales are to teens and adults for that end user. So it's been a dynamic shift in where we do business, how we do business, with whom we do business. And it leads to the bigger strategy, which is twofold. One was to recognize that the brand was bigger than the workshop. The workshop's a place, the brand is a feeling. How are you monetizing that feeling? What can we do to take this business, a retail, early experiential retailer that almost accidentally built a brand one heart ceremony at a time, and pivot that to be an intellectual branded company that just happens to have vertical retail as one of its revenue streams. Also with e-com as one of its revenue streams, or with outbound licensing or entertainment or global franchising. And then it changes, it's a mind shift on what you can become. And that's been the underlying driver of our growth strategy, while we've been correcting it, just doing some of the traditional, again, levers that you pull to return to profitability.
Yeah, it's a very unique approach. Because I think you realized at that point like how strong the Build-A-Bear brand is, and then creating other products that like don't have that experience is also something you had to figure out. I mean, now you guys clearly know, but even figuring out what those were was probably something that was a whole thought process to go through.
Yeah, a necessary one. While again, just the fundamentals
Hmm.
needed to get done. And I know you mentioned it, that I'd written a book called Stories in Heart. There's just, and most of it is, this happened, to me, or whatever it was, somewhere in my career, somewhere in my childhood. But the point of it is that there's an entire section about that is data based and research based and based from psychology to other input from professors on the the insights on what I was thinking at that time. And then there's a place for you to have some reflection about maybe you're at this particular moment in your career, whether it's you're dealing with perfectionism or any sort of other challenge that you might have. But in this particular case, in the book, it was about how to tackle difficult evolution and change agency And I break it down into like this two-pronged strategy, and this is exactly what we did. I call it SDSS times two, and it's stop doing stupid stuff first, that's followed by start doing smart stuff second, in that order. And that's true in your life too. Like, and we all know what we're doing that probably isn't working, and you don't even know why you're doing it. But don't ever underestimate how time consuming it is. And in business is like capital consuming, time consuming, mind share consuming, of the continuation of doing stuff that's no longer necessary, because that keeps you from finding the moment to do the things that you know you need to do. No matter what company you're in, there's still only 24 hours in a day. And you're going to have to figure out a way, because everyone's going to say, I don't have time to do this new stuff. So there's the discipline of not doing the things that aren't helping anymore that comes first. And so, like, for an example, when I arrived, our store fleet, 20% were unprofitable, and now we're 100% profitable. That
Wow.
took a long, arduous, disciplined process to make that happen.
Mhm.
And it was a multitude of tiny things, from the way we source, the way we price, the way we merchandise, the way we market, the lease negotiation, where we are in the lease, sales per square foot, like a long, arduous process of checking all these boxes off, which is also a critical factor in a turnaround situation. Trust me, you're not going to be asked to come in and turn something around where there's a silver bullet. That
Mhm.
doesn't happen. If you're coming in, the company has tried. They've tried probably everything that's obvious. It's the discipline to look at every link on the value chain and understand where money hides on all those links. And that's probably why a lot of times turnarounds don't work, is because that's not as much fun as, looking in this one box and going, there it is, and
Yeah.
fixing that. That's not going to happen.
What does the future of the brand look like today? Because we are in a unique retail landscape. Um, you've helped with this major turnaround that's put it in a good position from a capital standpoint to scale in kind of any ways you guys really want, to my knowledge. So, what does the future look like right now?
Well, we're pretty crystal about that with the investment community, and that we still believe that the brand is bigger than the company.
Mm.
When you have 90% brand awareness and affinity numbers that rival some of the biggest children's companies in the world, you probably have a little bit of runway. And we have clarified a three-pronged strategy that we've been executing pretty well. One is the evolution of our store footprint and geography. So more places in more ways, right? Now we've just opened in our 20th country. We opened in 6 countries even in the last quarter. So
Wow.
being able to do that's exciting. The second is the acceleration of the digital transformation, which is including e-com, but also the unlocking of all the value in the omni-channel front. I mean, because we're a trusted brand, we have over 20 million first party data, pieces of information. We have and 50 million people walk across a lease line in a Build-A-Bear every year. Another 50 million people come online every year. The interconnectivity of that and communicating with these amazing guests on a personalized level. That's using AI and a number of different, what they call
Mm.
journeys. I think we have a lot of opportunity there. And the third is the continued investment to return value to our shareholders. But that's just not always in the form of dividends or stock buybacks. That's in the form of applying capital to these previous objectives for this. The easiest way to say it is to more people, to drive the brand for more people, for more reasons, in more places, right? And when you do that, it's hard not to grow. At least
Mm.
that's the plan.
Definitely. Sharon, just the last question I have, like, what does the future look like for you? I mean, you wrote this book now, that I think provides a really unique perspective on a lot of different major subjects, one you just talked about before, but also meaning in the workplace. You've got, you've had a lot of experience as a business leader. What does kind of the future for you hold?
Well, right now I'm really excited about Build-A-Bear. I mean, when I got here, our stock price was $6 and change, and I've been a part with this extraordinary team to lead us through this evolution that included, as I noted, the retail apocalypse, but also COVID. And our stock went to $1 during COVID, and we had to lay off 90% of our organization and shut down 80% of our revenue stream. That's not anything you ever want to do as a leader. And I think that it's so important. It notes that you have to have trust with your company and your organization and your team. There's no way you can make it through something like that unless you've already laid this enormous strength bound framework and relationships, because these decisions are so difficult. And once you go through something like that together, you really bonded and you're really dedicated. And there's nothing more than I wish to continue to see the growth of this brand, and us deliver on these strategic initiatives that I've noted. Maxine always said, and she's right, that a teddy bear hug is understood in every language. We just really haven't completely tested that premise. And just that alone would be a remarkable journey. And so I'm so proud that we have now gotten to a place where we operate at a much more profitable level, gives us a lot more latitude. And the market has responded to that with our, stock up over $40 now.
It's amazing. It's great to hear the comeback has happened. Well, Sharon, thanks for taking the time and doing this. I think what you've done to preserve and grow, a brand that's been a part of so many people's childhood and as they get older. I mean, it was a part of mine. It was a part of a lot of people I know. I think is super important. And you mentioned just kind of the awareness around it today. I mean, it's a one of a kind experience. And I'm glad it's still here and that the international expansion is going. And I look forward to what's next. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure.